All right, so we are going to now continue just sort of opening this world of non-harmonic tones. Now that we've got the suspensions going, I think you're getting the idea that the world is a lot more broad than just the straightforward neighbor tone, passing tone options that we looked at first. And so today we're actually going to take one of those and even make it a little bit more interesting, or just more options with it. So let's get in here and let's expand further. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the passing tone, the very first non-harmonic tone option that we talked about, and just look at a way that we can sort of get even more out of the passing tone. And so if we go back and review what we've known about the passing tone, we remember that it's this 3-note pattern: preparation, passing tone, resolution, where we're basically filling in a third and we're passing between the 2 notes on the outside of the third. So this note is the passing note between those two. And we know that the outer 2 notes need to be consonant, meaning they're going to be in the chord. They're going to be members of the chord that's happening. So we've just got one sort of out of chord note in the middle with these 2 really solid notes on the outside. So that's a passing tone, filling that interval of a third. And what we've usually seen is that we're writing it as an 8th note off the beat, because generally speaking, what we're dealing with right now is a texture that is moving in pretty steady quarter notes. And so if these are quarter notes, if we want to fill a note in between, we're going to have 1 and 2, right? Put a little 8th note there. So anytime we talk about these non-harmonic tones, even if it's not said explicitly, there is a rhythmic element to it. And I hope that came across when we were talking about the suspensions, where suspensions have this really strong rhythmic element because they're so unique, because they're on the beat, right? And that really changes what's going to be felt when we hear a suspension. And so with all of these, there's this combination of the rhythmic stress or non-stress with the directionality, the motion, the direction, sort of the overall, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm just going to stick with motion. Of all of these, the parameters that make these unique and individualized. But with the passing tone, we're going to sort of see if we can bring some of that rhythmic identity to it. And we're going to say, since the one that we've been doing is off the beat, we could think of it almost as an unaccented passing tone. And what we're seeing now is that we actually can, instead of putting the passing tone off the beat, we can put it on the beat. And in that way, it becomes what we call an accented passing tone. Now, I really want to quickly just stop here and say, we don't really need to change our labeling of quote-unquote traditional unaccented passing tones. That's the sort of standard way that we would expect to see them. So we're still just going to call those passing tones. If they're off the beat, we don't need to qualify it as unaccented, nothing like that. But if it does happen on the beat, we want to make note of that. And so we're going to call those accented passing tones. So let's look at some examples here just to show sort of why we would want to do this for a couple of reasons. So the biggest reason, as we talked about with suspensions, is that anytime we put something on the beat, it's automatically less subtle than something that happens on the beat, right? So we want to make sure, I said that wrong. When we put something on the beat, it is less subtle and more noticeable than something that's off the beat. We think of things that are off the beat sometimes as being kind of hidden, right? And that can be great. That can be a really, really wonderful nuance, a nice subtlety to have. But that's not always what you want. So let's look at these 2 examples. If we look at all of the voices here, let's start from the bass up. In these 2 examples, bass goes from C to F, C to F. So that's the same. The tenors are the same, And we've got our altos are the same, So the only thing that's changing here is the soprano line, but even that is not a major shift because they're still going. They're going C, B, A, C, B, A. So it's the same 3 notes. Everything is the same. The only difference is the rhythmic placement of B, which really then just pushes A to a different rhythmic spot as well. So the rhythm of the soprano part is changing. So let's sort of look at this. And so the one on the left sounds like this. Lovely, very, very, very normal passing tone sound. And so if we listen to that again. That B certainly adds a little bit of interest if we just sort of hover. Got a nice, subtle, gorgeous sound that we can hear exactly where it's going. And if we did want to investigate, we could say, okay, well, look, we've got a B. The basses are still singing a C here. So there is this sort of major 7th clash in there. But this is where that idea of the subtlety comes into play, because when it's off the beat, it doesn't really come across super strongly. And so the rhythmic placement has a really big part to play in that, but also a really important element to consider is that the notes that are dissonant with one another are not attacking at the same time. Attack is sort of you may be familiar with this term in music, or you may not. The attack is how the note begins. It's right when the note starts. This is the attack, and then you can hear this next part is the decay in this case, because the note gets softer. And there are different things. Anybody who's played around with like synthesizers, that you can actually manipulate, you would know that there are these sort of different elements, or you may have done this in some digital audio workstations too. There are these different elements to the pitch, and the attack is how the note is started and where the note is started. So the attacks of the C in the bass and the B in the soprano are not at the same time, so they don't sound as dissonant. When we hear them together, that dissonance is much more clearly heard. Right, so that's the first one, traditional passing tone, off the beat, lovely, but not very noticeable if you're not paying attention. Now let's look on the right. And this again is the one where we've moved the rhythmic sort of writing of the soprano part over so that the B, this dissonant note, the passing tone, is happening on the beat. And let's see if this is more noticeable. Sorry, a little too subtle there in my playing. Yeah, so I'm certain that you're hearing that much more clearly. We get that 7th dissonance between the altos and the sopranos right together. Now, it's important to say that even though the rhythm has changed, the directionality, the intervallic elements and the directional elements of this passage are still the exact same. So it's still a passing tone because look, we've got a preparation note that's in the chord. We have a resolution note A that's also in the chord that it's going to, and these are a skip of a third, C to A. So the original here would have been in the soprano. We've got C to A, C, A. Very nice. And the B is not in that chord. It's not in either of those chords. And so it's passing between these two notes, right? So it still fills all these parameters of being a passing tone, despite the fact that now it has a much more noticeable rhythmic accent. So that's the first reason that we would want to use an accented passing tone, is that it's much less subtle. So it's going to stand out more, have a much bigger impact. And if you really want that strong dissonance, that's a really great way to accomplish it with a super familiar pattern, right? The passing tone is no more complicated here than it was at the end of last semester, but it has a much bigger impact. The second reason that we might want to use the accented passing tone, and the reason that it can be a really nice option to have, is that sometimes it can help us avoid bad part writing that we might do. So let's look at this example here. We're in E flat major. Now, like we said, this top one, or the left one, sorry, is a traditional passing tone. It's off the beat. Now, I know on the last slide, I said that we usually see these passing tones off the beat as eighth notes, but remember, here the chords are moving at a half note, so we just sort of make it the next subdivision down. So since these are moving at a half note, the non-harmonic tones, the passing tones in this case, are becoming eighth notes. If these were moving at the space of a quarter note, I think I just misspoke. Since these are moving at a half note, they become quarter notes. If the chords were changing at the pace of a quarter note here, we would be adding in eighth notes, right? So let's look here. This is a traditional passing tone. And so this D is filling in the space between E flat and C, and it's happening off the beat. So nothing is going to really stand out about it. It's pretty subtle off the beat. Let me just play the soprano and the alto voice here, though, and let's see if we can start to pick up what's going on. Do you hear how it starts to get a little bit clunky? Yeah, it's right here, and then especially there. What's happened here is we actually end up with parallel fifths because of the passing tone, because G in the alto to D in the soprano is a fifth, and that moves to F up to C, which is, of course, also a fifth. So this passing tone, if it was just the sixth, G to E flat, to the fifth, that'd be fine. Fifth to fifth, not the best. So what happens, though, is you might see this and maybe notice this in your work and think, oh, crap, I wrote parallel fifths. I got to go back to the drawing board, start this over. Not necessarily, because something that doesn't really work as a traditional passing tone, if we just make this an accented passing tone, instead of having quarter, quarter, half in the soprano and do half, quarter, quarter, it's all of a sudden gonna eliminate our parallel fifths, because instead of going, this is again, I'm talking between the alto and soprano voices, instead of going sixth, fifth, fifth, which you can hear that clunkiness, we're going to get sixth, sixth, fifth. And the beauty here, we get these parallel sixths, and then the 1/5 that we do have right here is itself softened because the notes are not attacking together. Fifths always sound more prominent. Every interval, whether it's a super consonant interval like a fifth, a perfect fifth, always sounds more strong when the two notes are attacked together. Fifths sound more perfect that way. Dissonances sound more dissonant that way. When we separate the attacks like this, the fiftiness, the perfectness of that sound is mitigated a little bit. It's a really interesting element. So that's the accented passing tone. Technique-wise, right, it's identical to the passing tone in terms of the preparation, passing tone, resolution, fills in the space of a third. The only change is that it's on the beat. So it means we might have to move that resolution note over from where it originally was written, but really the technique is the same. So let's continue, and we're going to learn about some new additions to our non-harmonic tone roster.